The late evening thickened the darkness over the road like an old blanket stuffed with heavy lead. My car rolled steadily down a narrow, overgrown path cutting through the wild autumn forest. I knew I shouldn't have taken this route, but time was pressing, and the detour promised hours of delay. Through the windshield, I saw the shadows deepening behind the trees, and it seemed that the forest was coming alive, whispering, breathing, watching. The branches creaked like old bones, and the wind howled as if someone was calling from the depths. The road, initially firm and smooth, grew worse, and soon my car started slipping on the soft ground. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep the car in the narrow rut, but the wheels spun futilely, digging into the earth. At that moment, the car jerked sharply and came to a halt. I felt it sink under its own weight, submerging into the viscous mud. The engine stalled, and a dead silence followed, interrupted only by the patter of rain on the hood. My heart raced. I realized I was stuck. Stepping out of the car, I immediately felt my feet sink into the mud. Swamp surrounded the road, and the car was almost buried to the axles. All my efforts to push the car out of this mire were in vain. The air under the hood was still warm, and I felt the car sinking further into this cursed place. My mobile phone was useless. There was no signal here. I looked around. The forest was strangely quiet. No birds, no rustling animals. The wind had died down, leaving only an ominous silence. Suddenly, in the distance, something rustled. The sound was barely audible, but it seemed different from the usual forest noises. Was it footsteps? Someone or something was moving slowly and steadily through the forest, heading right toward me. I tensed. My gaze darted toward the trees, but there was only endless darkness, through which not even the faint light of stars could break. Everything inside me screamed to return to the car, to take cover from whatever might be lurking in these ancient woods. The rustling grew louder. Something was definitely approaching, step by step, as if deliberately taking its time, savoring my helplessness. In that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was wrong. This forest wasn't just gloomy, it was alive, filled with a sinister, ancient energy that repelled and beckoned at the same time. I tried to start the car again, but the engine only let out a weak groan. At that moment, a low, hoarse growl echoed from the depths of the forest. My mind struggled to accept it as real, but it was neither the wind nor an animal. The growl was deep and filled with an ancient, overwhelming malice. I froze. Terrifying thoughts slid through my consciousness like shadows on the walls of ancient catacombs. Questions about what or who could make such a sound pierced my mind. In the darkness, a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. Something had emerged from the forest. I could barely make out its shape, but the figure moving in the dark was clearly larger than a man. It was tall, misshapen, with long arms that touched the ground. This thing moved slowly toward me, its movements unnatural, as if it was moving through water. The air around me suddenly became thick, heavy, as if soaked with an unbearable stench of decay and dampness. This creature seemed to be dragging darkness with it. My eyes couldn't fully focus on it, and the more I tried to see it clearly, the less distinct it became. It was as if the darkness around it was thickening, hiding its true form. The only thing that remained unchanged were two glowing red eyes staring directly at me. Those eyes burned with hatred and hunger, like a void leading into the deepest depths of hell. Fear paralyzed me. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. The creature came closer and closer, and with each step, The ground beneath it seemed to part, making way for this unknowable darkness, as if the forest itself welcomed it into its embrace. Finally, it stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could feel the cold emanating from it. "You have come." A voice rasped, like the crack of dry bones. It wasn't human, it wasn't animal. It was the voice of something ancient, something that had been here long before me in my car, something that knew neither time nor space. I stumbled and fell to the ground, feeling the mud seeping through my clothes. The creature bent over me, its figure almost consuming me with its shadow. I felt its breath. It was cold, like wind from a grave, and its stench made me choke with disgust. It was the smell of decay, wet earth, and rot. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. My body was petrified under the weight of this monster. Its eyes glinted, and in them, I saw my reflection, a small, pathetic creature, cornered, trapped. It savored my fear, feeding on it like a predator before pouncing on its prey. At that moment, as it extended its long, crooked hand toward me, I heard a sharp sound, the crack of branches. Light, a flash of light, blinding me for a second. Turning, I saw a faint glow in the distance. It was something real, something not from this nightmare. I broke into a run, my legs barely feeling the ground beneath them, heading for the light, not daring to look back. The forest seemed to come alive as I ran. The trees bent toward me, their branches trying to grab me, and the roots underfoot reached for my ankles. The creature followed, but I didn't dare slow down. The light grew closer, and finally I burst into an open space. It was an old, abandoned cabin, its door slightly ajar, with a faint but life-saving light shining from within. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me. The creature didn't follow. It stood outside, its red eyes glowing in the darkness, but it couldn't enter. The light from the cabin seemed to repel it, like an ancient charm protecting against evil. I looked around. The cabin was empty, but I knew as long as I stayed here, I was safe. Outside, the wind howled like 1,000 voices, and the forest sank back into darkness. But even now, sitting here in this cabin, I know it's waiting for me. It won't leave. And sooner or later, when the light fades, it will take me into that cursed forest forever,